She got a job in a prison to seek revenge, but when the truth came out, her whole world turned upside down. Hello friends, welcome to the channel. I'm listening to you. We're excited to present you with our latest original story. Don't forget to subscribe, click the notification bell, give us a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. The prison warden, Edward Stone, couldn't stand defiant subordinates, especially when it was a woman who dared to oppose him openly in front of the other guards. Victoria Summers, a newly hired officer who had joined only a month ago, had already gotten under his skin. She didn't try to curry favor with the leadership, wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and, most irritatingly, wouldn't blindly obey orders. That day, she crossed the line. When he ordered her to turn a blind eye to a violation, she looked him straight in the eye and coldly said, "I won't cover up dirty business." A heavy silence filled the room. The other guards exchanged nervous glances. "What did you say?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I said I won't cover for you, Mr. Stone." It was a direct challenge. He realized she needed to be broken. "You think you have any authority here, Summers?" he sneered. "You're nobody." She held his gaze. He knew exactly how to deal with someone like her. Stone stepped closer, leaned in and whispered, "Let's see how you feel after spending a night with the repeat offenders." Her face remained unreadable, but he saw a flicker of concern in her eyes. "There it is," he thought. Then he barked the order to the guards. "Lock her up in cell 6. The guards grabbed her arms, though she didn't resist. "You think I'll be scared?" Her voice was steady, but her stomach twisted into knots. Stone smirked. "You'll learn who's in charge, girl." They led her down the long prison corridor. Victoria realized she might have made a mistake, but there was no turning back now. Cell 6. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind her. The thick silence pressed on the room. 6 inmates stared at her intently. One of them, a muscular man with a shaved head, gave a lazy smirk. Well, look what they've thrown in here." Victoria didn't move. She felt their gazes, probing, hungry, dangerous. Another inmate, covered in tattoos, got up from his bunk and approached her. "You know where you've landed, sweetheart?" She clenched her fists, but her voice remained steady. "In a cell full of trash. Don't state the obvious." The inmates laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. The bald man stepped closer. "You're no warden here. You're prey." He reached out to grab her. 2 others followed. She tried to stand her ground, but rough hands grabbed her. The bald man pinned her to the bed, his heavy body pressing down on her. She could feel his rancid breath against her skin. Just as she was about to scream, a hoarse but firm voice came from the far corner of the cell. "Leave her!" The bald man froze. He turned but didn't argue, stepping aside immediately. The room fell completely silent. In the shadows sat a man, Gregory Wolfe, the one everyone here listened to. He stood up slowly, crossed his arms, and calmly looked at Victoria. "You're either brave or stupid." She exhaled slowly. "Probably a bit of both." He nodded with a faint smirk. "Good answer. Don't be afraid. You're under my protection. Stone is under control." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean? Is this why you're here, really?" His voice softened unexpectedly. Victoria didn't respond, but they both knew he was right. Victoria sat at the edge of the bunk. Why would an inmate, especially one so influential, intervene? Why protect her? She glanced at him. Gregory Wolfe sat calmly across from her, as if the whole situation amused him. "You don't seem scared," he finally spoke. She slowly raised her eyes. "Should I be?" Wolfe chuckled. "Most in your place would be crying in the corner by now." She shrugged. I'm not like most. He nodded, as though that was the answer he expected. Good. There's no place for the weak in here. He leaned in slightly. But you're not just any guard. She tensed. What do you mean? Wolf smirked. I can read people. You didn't come here for a paycheck or steady employment. You have a purpose. Victoria clenched her fists. You still haven't answered my question, she said firmly. Why did you protect me? Wolf studied her closely. Because you and I have the same enemy. She didn't break eye contact. Stone? That's right. Victoria wasn't surprised. She knew the warden had made plenty of enemies. But what exactly connected this inmate to Stone? You want to destroy him, don't you? She asked bluntly. Wolf smiled, though his eyes turned hard. I want justice, don't you? She clenched her jaw as memories resurfaced like dark ink spilling into water. 10 years ago. Young Victoria sat in the hospital corridor, clutching an old stuffed rabbit her father had given her. Doctors rushed through the halls, people spoke on phones, but all she heard was one sentence. They couldn't save him. The patient died instantly. Her father, Alexander Summers, was an engineer. He was coming home from work when a car struck him at full speed at a crosswalk, a red SUV. The driver never even braked. The court case led nowhere. Alexander was blamed for being careless while crossing, but Victoria remembered her grandmother's words. It's a lie. They bought their way out. They covered it up. But who were they? She didn't understand then. Later, she uncovered the truth. Behind the wheel was the son of a powerful man, Daniel Stone, and his father, Edward Stone, back then a young officer in traffic enforcement, buried the investigation, forged the reports, and hid the truth. Victoria swore to find him. Back to the present. She shook her head, driving away the memories. Wolf was still watching her. You're remembering why you came here? He asked. She nodded slowly. Yes. Wolf nodded back. I can help you. She narrowed her eyes. And why would I trust you? He leaned in, his voice low and confident. Because you want him to pay as much as I do. She stayed silent, but he was right. Victoria lay on the narrow prison bed, listening to the sounds of the cell, someone snoring, others whispering softly. But she couldn't sleep. Wolf's words kept echoing in her mind. You want him to pay too. She couldn't deny it. She had waited years for the moment to expose Stone. And now she might have an ally. She recalled the day she found the truth. She was 17, going through her grandmother's old papers when she stumbled upon a strange document, a crash scene report. But what it described didn't match what she remembered. Grandma, what is this? She asked, holding up the paper. The old woman sighed and sat heavily. I didn't want you to know, but you have a right. And then she told her everything. The accident had been covered up. Money had changed hands. Powerful people protected the guilty. Alexander wasn't at fault. The driver was Daniel Stone, the son of the man who now ran the prison. Victoria had crushed the paper in her trembling hands. Her heart pounded furiously. You know how the system works, child. But she couldn't accept it. Her father was dead, while his killer lived freely. And worse, his own father protected him. Back to the present. She snapped her eyes open. The darkness of the cell pressed down on her. She would see this through. She would destroy Stone. In the morning, when the cell doors opened, Edward Stone himself was standing at the threshold, watching her intently. Summers, let's go. She stood up without saying a word. They walked down the long corridor, inmates whispering behind bars as they passed. She held her head high. Inside his office, Stone locked the door behind them. "You've surprised me, Summers." She remained silent. "I expected you to come out of there broken." "You don't know me very well." He smiled, though there was no humor in his eyes. "You're not an ordinary guard." She stood her ground, waiting. "I've looked into your background. You're not here by chance." She tensed, but kept a straight face. "You know what intrigued me?" He sat behind his desk. "Why would a promising young journalist suddenly give it all up and work in a prison?" She didn't flinch. "Maybe I like discipline." He smirked. "Or maybe you like revenge." Her fingers curled into fists. He noticed. "You're here because of the past, aren't you? Because of the accident?" She didn't respond. "You wanted the truth. Fine, I'll tell you." He leaned forward. "Your father didn't die by accident." Her breath caught. "What?" He stared into her eyes. "You want to know who hit him? I know who." "You've already confirmed it was your son." He gave a crooked smile. "My son was driving, yes, but he wasn't at fault." Her pulse pounded in her temples. "You're lying." "If I wanted to lie, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you." She stood still, her world beginning to crumble. Could it really be more complicated than she had believed all these years? "If he's not guilty, then what happened?" "Ask yourself why," he said. "Why was my son even there that day? Why was he driving?" She faltered, but quickly regained her composure. "I don't care for your excuses." "You're missing something important, Victoria." He stood, walked over to his safe, and retrieved a folder. "I knew you'd come for this one day. That's why I kept it." He tossed a yellow folder on the table. Victoria didn't move. "What's this?" "The real report from the crash, the original period." Her fingers tightened. The original. So, the one in the official file was a forgery. He nodded. "That one was for the record. This is the truth." She opened the folder sharply. Her eyes scanned the pages. Driver, Daniel Edward Stone. Speed before impact, 95 kilometers per hour. Witnesses suggested the vehicle might have been cut off by another car. Victoria froze. "What the—" She flipped the page. Possible second vehicle involved. Unidentified, dark-colored car. Stone watched her closely. "Now, do you understand?" She looked up. "You're saying your son didn't just hit my father. He was set up." Stone let out a dry breath. "You don't want to listen." She tossed the folder back onto the table. "Stop trying to confuse me." Stone smiled faintly. "And now what? Will you keep pushing forward, even if I'm not guilty?" She froze. Inside, her emotions were boiling. She had always believed he was a monster who used his influence to cover his son's crime. But if it wasn't like that, when she left his office, her head was spinning. Victoria walked down the prison corridor, her legs barely carrying her. She hated him. But now, she hated herself even more for doubting. She had to talk to Wolf. Victoria stood outside Wolf's cell, clutching the documents Stone had given her. This couldn't be happening. For years, she had believed one thing, and now everything was upside down. Wolf was waiting for her, sitting lazily on his bunk, arms crossed, staring right at her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she threw the yellow folder onto the table. "Read." He raised an eyebrow but opened the folder nonetheless. His face remained expressionless for several minutes as he read. Then he froze, lifting his eyes to meet hers. "You don't trust me?" She shrugged. Should I? Wolf smirked. You realize he might just be trying to throw you off track. Victoria studied him carefully. Maybe, or maybe not. He snapped the folder shut. What are you planning to do now? She took a deep breath. Find out the truth. Wolf shook his head. The truth? In this place? Are you serious? He leaned forward, his voice turning harsh. There is no truth in this world, girl. There's only power. She clenched her fists. You're wrong. And you're too naive. He opened the folder again, scanning the lines. There's one interesting detail here, though. She frowned. What? Wolf met her gaze. The second car. She froze. You think it really existed? Wolf shrugged. If it did, someone wanted your father dead. His words hit her like a thunderbolt. Someone had staged the accident. But who? And why? Victoria stood inside Wolf's cell, his words drilling into her mind. If that's true, then someone wanted your father dead. The thought wouldn't leave her alone. For years, she had believed Edward Stone was the man responsible. But now, was it really an accident? Or had someone orchestrated the entire thing? Wolf closed the folder and looked at her again. Do you even realize what this means? Victoria clenched her fists. That my father's killer is still out there. He nodded. And probably much closer than you think. A chill ran down her spine. You know something, don't you? Wolf raised an eyebrow. Do I know people who framed others for their own gain? Of course, but in this specific case, not yet. For now. He leaned in, his voice lowering, dangerous. But if you want the truth, you'll have to go all the way. She inhaled deeply. And you'll help me? He smiled. Of course. I've got my own unfinished business with Stone. Victoria understood. This wasn't about kindness. It was strategy, but she needed his help. Later, in Stone's office. Victoria barged in without knocking. He looked up at her. You again. She threw the folder onto his desk. Tell me everything. He studied her for a moment. I've already told you it's more complicated than you think. I don't believe this was an accident. He raised an eyebrow. You think someone wanted your father dead? Yes. He exhaled slowly. You're closer to the truth than you realize. Her pulse quickened. What does that mean? Stone leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. I can't give you everything, but if you really want the truth, you'll have to dig deeper. She crossed her arms. Where do I start? He looked at her carefully. Start with his job, the factory where he worked. Look into what was happening there in the month leading up to the accident. His words struck her like lightning. Her father had worked at a large manufacturing plant, but she had never thought his work could have anything to do with his death. She stiffened. Are you hinting at something specific? Stone nodded slowly. All I know is that your father was a problem for someone. Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Her father's death hadn't been an accident. He had been eliminated. But by whom and why? Victoria left Stone's office, feeling the weight of his words growing heavier in her chest. Start with his job. Look into what happened at the factory a month before the accident. The words echoed in her head. She had always believed her father's death was due to negligence. But now, it seemed like something much darker. She couldn't stop. The next day, she got permission to leave the prison. She had to go back to where it all began. the old factory where her father had worked. It had been shut down years ago, but the building still stood abandoned. She entered, feeling her chest tighten. Dusty walls, broken windows. This was where her father had spent his last days, and this was where she would find the truth. She combed through the place until she found an old archive room. Papers were scattered across the floor. She sifted through document after document until she finally found his name. Alexander Summers, design engineer, final work week, October 2013. She flipped through more pages and froze. Internal investigation, data leak. Summers reported safety violations. Her eyes scanned the lines quickly. Her father had been reporting illegal operations at the factory, and 2 weeks later, he was dead. This couldn't be a coincidence. That evening, back in the prison, Victoria returned to Wolf's cell. He watched her silently as she walked in. "I found something." She laid the documents in front of him. "My father was trying to expose illegal dealings." Wolf raised an eyebrow. "And who was behind them?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but he had enemies." He picked up one of the papers. "So they didn't just get rid of him. They made it look like an accident." She nodded, clenching her fists. "I have to find out who did this." Wolf slowly nodded. "And you're going to need my help." Victoria stared at the papers, feeling her anger rising inside her. She had spent years hating Stone, believing he was her father's killer, but now things were far more complicated. Someone at the factory had wanted to cover up the truth, and that someone hadn't hesitated to have her father killed. Wolf watched her closely. "You do realize how dangerous this information is, don't you?" She clenched her fists tighter. "I'm not stopping now." That same evening, in Stone's office, Victoria stormed in, throwing the documents onto his desk. He raised his eyebrows. "So, you actually found it?" She stared at him, her eyes burning. "You knew." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I suspected." "Why didn't you tell me?" He slowly looked up. "You were blinded by hatred. You didn't want the truth." She tensed. He was right. She had spent years hunting for someone to blame, and once she thought she had found him, she refused to doubt herself. But now, who was really behind it? Stone remained silent for a moment, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out another folder. He handed it to her. "Here's your answer." With trembling hands, she opened the file and froze. The first name on the page hit her like a punch in the gut. Gregory Samuel Wolf. Her heart raced. "This has to be a mistake." Stone shook his head. "He was tied to the people running those illegal operations at the factory." "You're lying." "Number, he helped cover it up, and he knew your father was going to be eliminated." The room spun around her. Wolf. He had known all along, and he had hidden the truth. She spun around and rushed out of the office. Her breath quickened, her pulse pounded in her ears. Victoria stood outside Wolf's cell, her heart pounding. All this time she had believed Stone was her greatest enemy, but now everything had shifted. She stepped inside. Wolf sat on his bunk, leaning back with that same lazy grin, as if he had been waiting for this very moment. "There you are, Victoria." She didn't break eye contact, trying to read the calm behind his expression. "You knew. You've known this entire time." He smirked. "Of course I did. But isn't it interesting? You came to me for answers. Deep down, you were already suspicious." Victoria clenched her fists. "You manipulated me. You used me to destroy Stone. This whole investigation, it only served you." "You're smarter than you look, Vicky. but I'm afraid it's too late now." He leaned back, watching her with cold amusement. "You were always a pawn. You wanted to believe you were pursuing justice, but you were simply executing my plan. It was so easy to guide you. You never trusted Stone, did you? He was perfect for the role of villain. You just needed an excuse to go after him. And I simply handed it to you." Victoria felt a cold chill spread through her chest. "But why?" "Because Stone destroyed me long before prison. He dismantled my empire, put me behind these bars. And now, thanks to you, you've dismantled him." He smiled. "Do you know what's most amusing? He wasn't even guilty. You ruined a man who was simply trying to protect the system from people like me." Victoria slowly sank onto a chair. "No. Yes." Wolf's gaze was sharp with triumph. "You helped me do what I couldn't do alone. I fed you just enough false leads to guide you, and you tore him down. Why didn't you take me out? Why not deal with me yourself from the start?" He chuckled. "Where's the elegance in that? You were my tool. Why discard a blade when it still cuts perfectly?" Victoria stood up, her entire body trembling. "You'll pay for this." Wolf's grin widened. "Too late, Victoria. It's already done." She stormed out of the cell, the ground seeming to fall away beneath her feet. She had made a terrible mistake. Victoria stood in Stone's office once more. He watched her silently, his arms crossed. "I was wrong." The words were hard to speak. Stone simply sighed. "You're not the first to fall for Wolf's games. He's been building traps his entire life. You were just another one." She turned away, clenching her jaw. "I've ruined you, destroyed your reputation. Everything you stood for has collapsed. You convinced yourself you were chasing the truth, but you never asked the most important question." He stepped closer, looking her in the eyes. "Who benefited from all this?" She swallowed hard. "And now?" Stone shrugged. "Wolf's in isolation. He has no more influence, but his case isn't closed yet." Victoria paused. "So there's still a chance to fix it?" "That's up to you." She looked at him. "You could have stopped me." "Would you have listened?" Silence hung between them. "No." Stone nodded. "Exactly." She turned toward the door. "I'll make it right. We'll see."